Friday episode of the Donovan Bandits. I'm Orrin Phillips, and this weekend is HurriCon, July 20th, East Rockaway, New York, in Long Island, 100 Main Street. We're going to be talking today to David Donovan, the man behind HurriCon. It's not only a great comic book show, but it also helps raise money to help the community. You'll hear the whole story that Dave was going to tell. It's really wonderful stuff coming off of Hurricane Sandy years ago. And he's been doing it for a couple of years now. It's a great success. You're going to have a lot of fun listening to his stories, hearing all about how this con came together, and his thoughts on the comic industry today. David he likes to call himself the fifth Bandito, next to Sean, Mike, Joe, and myself. We're totally cool with that because he's a totally cool guy, and you're going to find that out right now. Here is David Donovan. Phillips, and I am so pleased today to be speaking to David Donovan, the man behind HurriCon. Sir, thank you so much for taking the time.
My pleasure, Orrin. Thanks a lot. Appreciate you taking the time to help us get the word out.
Well, it's a great event, but let's start way at the beginning. How did you first discover comic books?
Actually, it's a sad story. I have two older brothers, Artie and Dennis, and I'm sure they collected comics. Mm-hmm. And in East Rockaway, the town where we do the HurriCon, they have a yearly thing in June. Great name. It's called the Huckleberry Frolic. Now, I've never seen a huckleberry in East Rockaway. I know a couple of huckleberries, but I've never seen a huckleberry. Mm-hmm. And they had a table where people donated books and everything else. And my mom donated all the comics from the house to this table. And we kind of like lost them. And I'm like, wow. And so I was trying to think back to my first comic, and I think it was Avengers. I think it was in the 80s. The 80s meaning the numbers, not the year, because my birthday is Saturday. Yeah, my birthday's Saturday. We'll get into that too. But it's the one where it's got Daredevil on the cover and like, we have to rush in, we have to help. A classic John Buscema cover. I love it. And that is like the first one after the traumatic episode of losing all the comics. That's the first one I remember purchasing. And that's how I started with that Avengers issue, yeah.
And were you able to get back any of those ones that you lost throughout the years, or you don't even know what they were at this point?
It was quite sad. My mom's raising three boys. My dad's there too. My mom's raising three boys. I'll never forget one time. I think it was my older brother Artie was reading my copy of Avengers number 100. Okay. Now, Avengers number 100 for me is a seminal issue. And the crazy thing is that I'm good friends with a guy named Robert Frey. I belong to a bunch of guys that collect comic art, and we meet about every month. And Robert has like 7 or 8 pages from that issue. And every time I look at a page, I say, Robert, you don't understand. I remember, and I don't know how many times I read it, but I mean, I remember every detail of this page, everything. And, we talk about, okay, did Smith ink this one? Was this one inked by Sid Shaw's? Did Joe Sinonic this page? We love it. But getting back to the issue, I'll never forget my brother Artie's reading it. And of course, he's bending back the cover. And I'm getting really, really upset. And I'm arguing with him. He's arguing with Mom grabs the comic and she rips it in half. Boy, she taught me a lesson.
I was going to say, wow, she
was. I had to run down to the newsstand to get another copy. Well, yeah, it's traumatic. Being a comic collector is very traumatic. It is for me. It is for me. By the way, my mom is still 93.
Oh, God bless.
And my mom is still 93. My mom is still alive, and she's 93. Mm-hmm. And she comes to the HurriCon every year. She sits at a table, not at the door, but close to the door. And she basically holds court, and everybody comes up and greets her and asks her how she's lived so long. And she talks to them, and she'll be there again on July 20th. Yeah, that's the next one, July 20th. Yes.
So how did you get started in the con community itself?
That is that relates to HurriCon. What happened was I probably one of my first shows was probably maybe in 1976. And I remember Marvel had their show and DC also did a show at the same time. And there was also the Phil Seuling Con. And I remember going to the Marvel one. I don't know how I didn't get to meet Stan Lee or Jack Kirby. I don't understand that. Although I did spend some time with Joe Sinnott. He was wonderful. And then DC Con, I didn't get to meet like Joe Shuster or Jerry Siegel or Bob Kane. And the weird thing is you connect with people over Facebook. And there's a guy named Alan who grew up in East Rockaway, now lives in Florida, who was really tight with Bob Kane. He showed me all this Bob Kane stuff, and I'm like, I don't know, how did you do this? And then, so going to those shows, what happened was, like, once in a while I'd go with some friends, but I usually would go by myself. You know, think about it. I'm a 14 to 15-year-old in the 70s. I'm going into Manhattan by myself, going to it was usually at the Hotel Commodore, which was my Grand Central station. And then it started being at the Penta across the street from Penn. So I'd go to either one of those by myself, by myself. And what happened was, you'd meet other like-minded friends, or you weren't even friends yet, but they took you in. And it didn't matter what color you were, what sexual orientation you were, what your nationality was. They were so sweet and so nice to you. They just pulled you in. And that's the basis for me for HurriCon. It's like, look, you're coming here, you're safe here, you be who you want to be. We all love comics. We're here to enjoy comics. We're also here to enjoy art. There's a lot of different artists and stuff there too. So I'm trying to bring that, back into it, and just say, hey, you enjoy this stuff, join us, come on in. So I had a great experience as a young person with these New York shows, with all the people I met. And again, even some of those I've connected with on Facebook. It's wild, man. You meet all these people how many years later, and they remember you. It's very cool.
Absolutely.
Very cool.
You just sort of touched on it, but for you, what makes a good con experience for a fan? What are the ingredients that you look for, not only for your con, but when you go to cons, things that you learn and pick up on as to, okay, this is how you do it the right way?
The right way is when you meet a creator you like or you worship. It's pretty close together. You can't get all crazy, like, you're shaking and stuff. You have to kind of like relax, because the bottom line is, they're you. They were you at one point. They were a fan at one point. You hear all these stories. Like, I love when Kelly Jones tells stories on Facebook about meeting Marshall Rogers and how nice he was, and he'd critique his art and show him stuff and give him. So they were you. And going to a con, well, I'm pretty New York centric, but like last year I went to Baltimore Comic Con, and that like raised the bar. I was like, wow, this is really, like, we're planning on going back. The whole family goes, by the way. It's not just me. Kids go, their wives go, the whole deal. It's a whole Donovan excursion. But that show was great. And, in New York, I don't know, the Javits Center, going to New York Comic Con, it can be a bit much, but if you know how to pace yourself, if you know to wear your comfortable shoes, if you know to bring something to eat, if you know to bring something to drink, that's going to make your experience so much better. And, also, there are two trains of thought when you go to a con. I've said to my kids, well, you got to look at everything before you buy anything. But now it's sort of like, if you see it, you better buy it, because maybe it won't be there tomorrow. It might be there later. If it's an exclusive, you got to get it. My thing is, look, I love collecting sketches, collecting art, and hopefully I'll show you some of it. Some of the prices are just nuts.
Right.
And look, I don't want to get into a big debate about it, but even the creators are now that are now charging for autographs. I get it. These guys don't have a retirement plan. They don't have a health plan. They got to pay for this somehow. So it's changed in that way, and I understand it. Look, they got to make a living too. I understand it. And comics have been a very, very unfavorable to creators industry. I mean, right now, Peter David's on GoFundMe about his problems. And I'll tell you something that I don't think anybody knows, but I've written like 2 letters to Robert Iger, who's the head of Disney. And I said, look, you have to help this guy out. You just can't say, leave it up to him. He's got to be able to be healthy again. He's a great writer. Everything he writes, I love. Here's the crazy thing, right? Robert Iger grew up in Oceanside. Oceanside is the town next to East Rockaway. Yeah. So I approached him about that. Plus, you got to realize something. His grandfather was Jerry Iger, who had a studio with Will Eisner. Right. So he must have heard stories about how tough it is to make it and make a success in the business. So he must know the trials and tribulations. Right. And even crazier, when Iger went to Disney, he worked with Michael Eisner. So it was, again, Eisner and Iger were there. So it's like, it's just so unforgiving for some of these creators. I feel so bad. And it's so funny. You see behind me these two pieces by Joe Giella. A good friend of mine, Jeff, was Joe's rep for years. Joe passed away, I believe it was 93. Amazing talent. And to tell you the truth, Joe only got better with age.
Yeah.
So I have two recreations here that he did for me. And when I talked to him about it, he said, well, do you want me to do it exactly? I said, no, I want the Joe Giella treatment. So these are like painted. They're beautiful. And they're so nice that my wife has let them hang them up. This is our dining room, and they're hanging up at our dining room. I never thought I'd see any comic art in my dining room. I'm like, no, that's got to go. It's got to go in Oren's basement. It's not going in your dining room. So she allowed me to do that. So, but even with Joe, Jeff helped him out so much. Got into the shows. He was charging for autographs, but the guy, this is the guy's retirement. You got to realize that if they didn't plan ahead, they don't have anything. And it's so sad because so many of these people are had such an impact on you. Like I talk to Don McGregor online all the time, and I'm like, you really did something to my teenage mind with these stories with like Kill Raven and the Black Panther, and even like a guy like Steve Gerber, the stuff that he did in the 70s. It was totally another way. It's not the kind of thing Stanley would do, but back in those days, if you got it on time, everything was cool. They didn't bother you about it.
Yep.
So again, the one thing about the cons, so here's what I would say. If you go to a con and you see somebody you really enjoyed, I think you have to go up to them and tell them, I enjoy your artwork. I enjoy your writing. It had a difference in my life. That's what you should definitely do. So that would be my advice. Don't be scared. Don't be nervous. They're just like you, and you don't even have to buy anything if you don't want to.
Right.
Just go up and tell them, hey, man, it's great to meet you and thank you. And you're done. And if you do that with a guy like Chris Claremont, you won't leave for 10 minutes because he'll talk to you for 10 minutes.
Well, speaking of helping people out, HurriCon is all about helping the community as well. What happened and what made you want to start this?
It's what had happened was Hurricane Sandy hit East Rockaway really bad. There was a 13-foot swell that came into town. So basically, it came like through the canal, and it flooded all the homes by the water. Really, really bad. In fact, if there's a park called Bay Park, and if you go there, it'll show you the level of the water, how bad it was, because it had never been that bad. And in fact, my mom and dad lived across the street from a canal. The entire basement was flooded to like 6 feet. There was no power, so you couldn't pump it out. So it just stayed there. So we had to try and get a gas pump, and we got that going. But what had happened in town was they had set up a relief center at the firehouse on Main Street. So people were coming down to get water, batteries, flashlights, whatever they had, right? Fire department said, look, we can't keep this here. We're the fire department. This is an active, you can't. So at that time, our pastor's name was Mark Lukens at Bethany Church. He said, okay, bring it to the church. So we set up in the gymnasium, set up all these tables. So there were like 5 long rows of tables stacked with clothing, cleaning supplies, with everything. And, everybody came down, United Way, Red Cross, FEMA, and they brought things there. And we set up for months afterwards to serve the community. That's what it was. But the problem was everybody that came into the church tracked in the sewage from the sewage plant that was in the street. They tracked in the dirt. They tracked in the oil. The floor, while it wasn't ruined, it was a disaster. It had to be redone. Okay, so we said, okay, we approached the town about it because they said, hey, you're the official, no problem. We'll take care of it for you. Well, 2-3 years later, I contact them and they say, what are you talking about? I said, wait a second. We were the official. Oh, no, we can't give money to a church. That's not, you can imagine what that would be. I said, all right, no problem, fine. We'll find a different way. And head of the board of trustees said to me, look, David, you got to think of something. What can you do? So at that time, there were 2 big conventions on Long Island. I approached both of them separately. I said, look, here's our space, rent it, throw your show. Right. Wouldn't that be great to have a comic book convention in East Rockaway? And, you got this space. It's all set up. I got a kitchen. Both of them turned me down flat. And I said, why? Why not? Oh, it's not big enough. We can't make any money. All right. So I go home to my wife, Linda, and I said to her, look, we're not going to be able to do the show. And she said, why? And I said, well, I approached both of these guys, and they said, no. And she said, okay, well, why don't you do it? And I said to myself, Linda, why would I want to run a comic book convention? And she looked at me and she said, I don't know. Why would you want to run a comic book convention? So it was extremely grassroots. I mean, there's no handbook on how to do this. You start at the bottom and you start contacting shops and dealers that you see, explain to them what it is, what it's all about. It's a total fundraiser, so nobody's making any money. We serve food to make money. We're partnered with a local comic shop called Cosmic Comics in Baldwin. They give us all kinds of free comics to give out. So we do that. We have an enormous raffle table that's just crazy, the amount of stuff. As I told you before the interview, my employer gives me some cool stuff. I got a page right here, donated. This is a Paul Pelletier Superman page. Let me get that back in. And that's actually donated by two of our artists that can't be there. Two of our artists are named, we got Kimball Thorpe, and we also have Bill Mitchell. They come every year, but they can't make it in July, so they donated that, so that's part of it. We have big omnibuses, we have toys, and the great thing is, like, even day of, other stuff comes in, so it's a huge table. And I did tell you that I worked for AMC Broadcasting and Technology earlier. In the past, they've donated VHSs of The Walking Dead. They've donated Negan's bat. They've donated the sword that the Michonne uses. So all these cool things come in, and the raffle takes like almost an hour and a half because first of all, they hand me a mic and I can't shut up. I mean, look, I'm no Oren, folks. Like I'm no Oren. I'm not. I can tell right now. I'm trying. And that fifth thing, I'm writing it down again. Fifth.
The fifth bandit. Donovan. There you go. See?
I like the sound. So we do a big raffle for that. And all the table money goes to the church. All the admission's $5 to get in. Kids in costume are free, so that's always fun. They come in, they wear their Halloween costumes, whatever. Because usually it's in November, a couple of weeks after Halloween, so they keep their costumes. Reason we're doing it now twice a year is the need's even greater. Our church has been here since 1885. It needs help. Our pastor, the guy that put the stuff at the church, he retired after 25 years. We're redoing his house to attract a new pastor. It's a very hard thing to do in the society we're in right now. A lot of people retired after COVID. A lot of people aren't going into the ministry. It's a Protestant church, by the way. It's a Christian Protestant church. It's also what's known as an open and affirming church. The church took a vote years ago to say the church is open and affirming. So what that basically means is no one is turned away at our door. You don't need to know anything about a Christian or being anything like that. You come in, you worship, you take communion, you sing, whatever you want. And it's almost like HurriCon. I don't care what your background is. I don't care where you're from. None of that stuff. You're coming in, you're joining us, you're part of our group. And that's what Bethany is. We fly the rainbow flag outside. It's just part of being a good quote unquote Christian and a good person. You want people to feel good too. I mean, in this world where everything is so kind of crazy, come in here and feel good, have a good time. That's what it's all about. That's what it's all about.
So in that time, what are some of the lessons you've learned about putting on a con that you didn't know before?
Okay, first of all, somebody's always going to cancel. And I'm not talking about artists or something, but somebody passed away, car broke down, you name it. So it's always like if you say, hey, I sold out all my tables, yeah, good for you. Because by the day it happens, 4 of them aren't going to be sold anymore. And the way that I treat the show is, it's like, look, you're not signing a contract. You're not doing any of that stuff. Look, the tables are extremely reasonable. They're $50. And, it's like, look, it's funny because when I was trying to figure out how to price them, I was talking to one of the guys that runs the shows, and I said, oh, man, I'm really thinking about charging $50 for the table. And he said to me, okay. I said, you think that's okay? He says, David, look, if somebody can't make $50 back in their first hour here, there's a problem. And the event, the way I really push the event is like this. This event is a comic art convention. Yes, it's a benefit. Yes. But it's about East Rockaway coming back to Bethany Church and supporting the church. That's what it's about. So I'm out there. Every store on Main Street's got a flyer from the show. The library does a display with comics and giving away comics and a big poster. You're interviewing me for some reason, and you must have had 4 cancellations. Yeah, I'll put this schmuck on my show. I looked at your guest list. I'm like, Paul Levitz, Paul Cupham. One of these things is not like the other. I'm like, okay, it's fine. We'll just leave it at that. It's okay. But
you're a luminary as well. Hey, you're doing a great thing for the community, and I think that's as big.
Well, and also the thing about it is, it's I'm the face of it. I got a face for this, But my wife helps out. My son David, his girlfriend Faith, my son John, Jack Kirby Donovan, his wife Maria comes. My mom comes. My brother Dennis, my sister-in-law Joan. Their whole family comes and brings the kids. So and the church, people in the church help too. I mean, I got my wife Linda's in the kitchen cooking with another 2 ladies that help her. People volunteer to help out. It's a community event. It's a church event, and we're trying to, I guess, bring the vibrancy of the comics into the bigger world to reflect the vibrancy of the church. So it's like a give and take. You know what I'm saying? That's what I think I would call it, a give and take. Yeah.
So who is on the guest list for this summer?
For this summer, okay, maybe I should look that up. I could tell you. Hold on. It's we have a lot of local people come, so it's not really it's not New York Comic Con, which is okay. Right. But I'm looking at it right now. Let me go through it. So of course the returning guest is Keith Williams. This guy does every show. He is the nicest guy. He is the nicest guy. In fact, he was at CradleCon. Mm-hmm. And his mom was there. And I'm like, wow. I said, Keith, I got to tell you a funny story. You came up to my mother and you were telling, oh, your birthday's coming up and this and that. And she was shaking her head. I said, she didn't hear a damn word you said. I mean, she didn't have a hearing aid. She goes, oh, you kidding?
He is the nicest man.
Oh, my God. And super talented. I mean, oh my gosh. He ain't, let's see. Don McGregor did a story for, I believe it was Web of Spider-Man. I might be wrong. No, it's just Spider-Man. It was called Shadow of a Gunner. It's about a gun, something like that, about gun violence in school. Yep. Marshall Rogers drew it. Keith Williams inked it. Yep. And I said to him at one of the other shows, I said, could you do me like a Batman drawing in sort of a Marshall Rogers style? He knocked that out. It was so beautiful. He did such a great job. And he's such a nice guy. So starting off, we have Phil Russert, who publishes Tragedy. Yep. And he's going to be coming and doing that, and so on that. My buddies Lou and Bill and Rich, these guys. The great thing is I have a nice little subsection of guys that have been collecting forever. So they bring stuff that you're never going to see. They're going to sign paperback. I mean, all this. It's amazing what they bring to the show. I got another guy. Let's see. Let's go down. So Keith is coming. Eddie Avila is a local guy who's going to come. He's been supporting us since day one, but he's never been able to come. And now I'm actually shocked. I'm like, wow, this is so great that he's coming. We have a local artist named Megan Taylor. She's really good at like nature photography, drawing and stuff like that. She's been coming forever. Her husband's name is James Barry. He does a lot of comics work. We also have Joe Ciano, who wrote something in the woods. I forgot the name. Joe Ciano wrote a really, really scary graphic novel. Really, really scary. And also we have some comic book fandom royalty. I don't know if you know who Ken Gale is. Ken Gale's been a fan since the 70s, publishing fanzines, what have you. He published it. He published his own comics for a long time. And he also hosted a radio show on WBAI called Nuff Said for about 6 years. And he interviewed everybody: Stan Lee, Steve Gerber, Steve Englehart, Marshall Rogers. I mean, Walt Simonson. Everybody has been interviewed by him. And there's a book coming out on Marshall Rogers very soon that I sold them one of Ken's interviews, so they're going to use that. And one of the last issues of Comic Book Creator that was spotlighting Steve Gerber, they printed one of Ken's interviews with Steve Gerber. So it's like a local show. I mean, we've had bigger people. I mean, Franco came down twice, which was fantastic. I love Franco. I've got so much of his artwork here. He's been a wonderful guest and a wonderful supporter. We've had one of the more interesting guests is a guy who's coming back in November. His name is Sean Jackson. And when I worked at ABC News, he was my art director.
Okay.
And he does hand-drawn maze books. He's done one for Marvel and one for Star Wars. And they are the most amazing books you have ever seen. All hand-drawn mazes. It's crazy how cool it is. Michael Jan Friedman, the Star Trek novelist, he's a local Long Island guy. He's come down before, so we loved having him. What I try and do every time is at least 2 to 3 guests are just local artists who have never done a show before or are very, very fresh and new. You just bring them in, you're like, hey, have a good time. That's why, again, the welcoming thing. That's what we're trying to do. Get you used to it,
So who are
it's a lot of fun.
Oh, it is. So who are you?
And not to take away from the Dollar Bin Bandits being my number one favorite podcast. Did I just say that? Yes, I did. There's another podcast called It Came from the Radio, hosted by Mark Torres. And Mark Torres has gone on, he said on point that our raffle table is the best raffle table he's ever seen in a Long Island comic book convention. So I don't know if you can take Mark at his word, but I didn't say it. He did. He said it. He said it.
It's out there. It's for public knowledge at this point. Can't take it back. So who is your white whales as far as guests go? Who do you really, really want that you haven't gotten just yet?
Oh, one of the great ones we got, I forgot to mention. Okay, one of the great ones we got is another local guy. His name is Jacob Shabbat. Now, Jacob does a lot of work for Marvel, but he's really, really known for Hello Kitty. He's done a lot of work for Hello Kitty. So he's a fabulous artist like that. And I tried to get him all the time because he always appears at Grasshopper Comics Christmas party.
Okay.
And he's busy from the time he comes in. He's drawing everything, what have you. He's just having a great time. And I got him to come down the last one we did, which would have been last November. And he did me 2 pieces that are just amazing. I'm going to find them for you to show it to you. Actually, I'll show you one thing right here. This was a whale right here. This is a Nick Darrington page from the Batman universe he did with Brian Michael Bendis. Did you read that story?
Not yet, no.
Aaron, I got to tell you, Bendis has not done really any Batman work.
Right.
That story is amazing. It's got everybody in it. Jonah Hex, Nightwing. I mean, you name it. He has incorporated every character, and it's the only Batman story that Bendis ever did, and he did a wonderful job. Oh, here we go. Here's Jacob's stuff. So Jacob did 2 things for me. He recreated the classic Carmine Infantino Batman on the rooftop, and he did it with the Dark Knight characters. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, I couldn't get enough of that, so I asked him, hey, could you do the spotlight cover with the Dark Knight characters?
That's beautiful.
So Jacob is definitely a white whale. We have a couple of people on Long Island that I've been trying to get. Joe Casey is a local guy on Long Island. I met him a bunch of times at the Grasshopper show, and I've asked him. He said maybe. So he hasn't been able to make it. I'm trying to think of who else. I mean, getting Franco to come down, which was crazy because he's in upstate New York. No, he's not. He's in where it's White Plains.
He's literally he's the next town down from me.
Exactly.
He teaches taught the same district my wife teaches in.
Oh wow, that's so cool.
Yeah.
So he came down. When he came down, I was shocked because I never expected him to come down. And the crazy thing about his connection to East Rockaway is he went to school at Adelphi University, and he worked for a production company run by a friend of mine from high school. Oh, wow. So they had. He said, "Do you know who Franco is?" I said, "Yeah." Actually, there's a Franco piece, a nice eyeball of the Thing, which is beautiful. He did a great job of that. Then he did a cool one with Spider-Man and Venom.
That's awesome.
I can never walk past his table without buying something. It's crazy because he has such a fresh kind of style that I don't know. So and there's I got a bunch of Joe Giellas in here. There's a Joe Giella. There's a Star Sapphire and Green Lantern piece that he did. Yeah, what else? We got another Joe Giella.
Oh wow! Spot on.
Another Batman over here on the rooftop, of course. Yeah, Joe just got better and better, and he was such a sweet guy. I mean, you never, you had no airs about him, just wonderful. It's funny, I talked about how these guys, had it rough, and Joe was a real example of that because I got to interview him at an Eternal Con, and we were talking, and he was saying that when he was an artist, if he didn't have work lined up in being an artist, he had to go out and roof. He was a roofer. And that stuck with my wife. She's like, you got to be kidding me. This guy is so, but I think it was during the 50s when it was sort of the crunch on comics where they were cutting back. He had to put shingles on roofs for a living because he had to support a family, which was interesting because if you think about back then, right? Think about the 60s or the 50s going into the 60s. You got a guy like Jack Kirby. Look, he could turn out, 2-3 pages a day, what have you. But these guys, these artists were all supporting a family just being a comic book artist. That blows my mind that they could do that. Because I don't know if you can do that nowadays, but back then you could. And Kirby was like a Williston Park guy. And it's funny, when I grew up in East Rockaway, and the next town over was a very high class area called Hewlett Harbor. And that's where Stan Lee first went. And it's funny, if you look it up in the New York Times, he talks about all the homes he owned in Hewlett Harbor. Like he bought one reasonable, then he went up, then he went up, then he went up. And I remember one time I saw a piece of artwork and Stan had written that he was going to meet Jack Kirby at the golf club. That I knew where that golf club was. Like, wow, they're there. And I used to clean pools in that neighborhood. I'm like, I wonder if Kirby lived here. Not Kirby, if Stanley lived here. I'm looking around. I didn't see anything. And my mom worked at a Jewish deli called the Woodrow. And I always thought, man, I wonder if she ever worked on Stanley. She ever waited on Stanley, number one. And number two, if she did, how come she didn't mention me? I mean, my whole life could have been different. So she ripped up that issue of Avengers 100. You're never going to do work. You'll never work this business again. Thanks, Mom.
Hey, she was just trying to break up a fight on you guys.
But we're so fortunate in this area that there is so much history of comics here, and the bottom line is you got to realize that these are all, like you said, when you go to the shows, these are all human beings doing these things. So say your monthly comic doesn't come out the next month when it should be. Okay. You don't know if the artist got COVID or the writer had a death. You know what I mean? You have to be a little more forgiving of these guys. I mean, I know it's a periodical. I get it. But, give them a break, man. This isn't life or death. It's
comics.
I mean, come on.
I've spoken to some other folks who do cons, and it seems like it's a year-round process. Like the minute
it never stops.
And you start planning for the next one, and then you have to plan for the next one, and this and that.
And you're always thinking of what's like the next step. Like I'm very fortunate in this area we have a local newspaper run by an outfit called the Herald Communications. They've done a story in HurriCon every year. They've either done a story before, a story after. Just so you know, I don't know if you looked at the link, but last year I was the person of the year. No airs about me, but it was all about HurriCon.
That's awesome, though, and well deserved.
So they've been lucky. They've been great. But the other news outlets, I don't understand it. You talk to the local, there's the local paper Newsday here. They never answer your emails. You talk to News 12. They never. It's amazing that something like comics that's so prevalent in the pop culture that they wouldn't want to take advantage of it. So I don't, and my thing is, look, it's a total fundraiser. It's a total nonprofit. I can't beat my head against the wall. Oh, they don't want to talk. Yeah, fine. So find something else to do. So the other day I was thinking, what's another way of getting the word out? And I don't know if they have these in your neighborhood, but do you ever see, like, you drive past the house and you see that the library, give a book, take a book, these little libraries they put on a pole? Now, everyone in my neighborhood has about 10 comics from Free Comic Book Day with a flyer for HurriCon.
Hey, you know what? And then maybe that hooks on some young readers and gets them into reading and gets them into comics. And I
don't know.
That starts a new generation.
I hope so. So I'm always trying to think of, like, what's the next step? Because, like I said, it's a total fundraiser. It's like a one-man show. I have help, but, the bottom line is it's a fun time. We're not worried about, the main thing is I want the dealers to all make some money. That's the main thing. That's why they're there, because it's a lot. You got to carry those comics up. You got to lay them down. You're sitting there for like 6-7 hours. So what we do in the morning is when the dealers come in the morning, make sure the coffee's made, the tea's made, and there's butter rolls for all the dealers. Let's give them something to eat, make them happy. Or they need water, whatever they need. Nobody gets charged for that, because we want them to have a good time. We wouldn't be there without the support of the dealers and the vendors. We wouldn't be there. So whether they're an artist or they're a comic book store or they're selling toys or they're selling artwork, whatever they're doing, we wouldn't be there without them. So we try and treat them that way. And a lot of them come. I mean, I must say, most of the people that are there, are repeat offenders for the most part. They really are. So they do come back.
Now, do you ever get a couple minutes to walk around, do a little shopping yourself, or are you just so busy trying to make sure everything else is running smoothly?
I would say I am so busy, but I've made more of an effort recently. And I hate to bring up his name again, but Mark Torres of the podcast, It Came From the Radio, said to me one time, he looked at me and he says, David, what's wrong? And I said, what do you mean what's wrong? He goes, well, I come into the show. You got a smiling face. You're shaking hands. You're hugging people. You're in a good mood. He goes, that's not what a person who runs a comic book show is like during the comic book show. What's wrong? And I'm like, well, I don't know. I'm hanging out with friends. We all have the same common interests. My family is here. My church people are here. I'm comfortable. I mean, I'm happy. What do you mean? So, I mean, I'm trying to, because there's just so much, cool stuff there if you dig a little deeper. And everybody's, if you come to the show, I guarantee you, everybody's ready to make a deal because they don't want to carry this stuff home. They are ready to make a deal with you. If you're ready, they are ready to make a deal. They want to make a deal and make you happy. And like I said, a lot of the guys that I know, like from my art group, what have you, the stuff that they're selling, you don't see a lot of, signed books, signed artist editions, mezcos that you never saw, premium stuff. They had these, like I said, they're all ready to make a deal. Actually, I got another piece of artwork to show you. I love meeting a guy named Donovan. So I met Derek Donovan at the Baltimore show, and he did a Duckman and Duck Girl. This was a very interesting issue of the Howard the Duck magazine that was a spoof on Batman that Marshall Rogers drew. As you can tell, he's like probably my favorite artist. If we walked up the steps to my second floor, you would experience my wall of Marshall. About 6 pieces up there. Nothing crazy expensive, but hey,
To have a piece of history, that's pretty awesome.
Oh, I'll tell you, on Long Island in this area, we used to do a show in Rockville Center at the Holiday Inn. And it was a great show run by the guy who owned Cosmic Comics before this guy who owns it now. And one day I'm sitting there and this guy comes in with a stack of artwork and he drops it down. And it's Mike Esposito on his way to the track. And he has to raise money for his on his way to the track. He had grabbed pages from John Romita. So I own 2 pages from when Marvel went to the 25-cent issue for a month, the bigger issues.
Yeah.
From Captain America, with his air pack on and Nick Fury and what have you. 2 of those in sequence hanging on the wall upstairs. And also the issue after the death of the Green Goblin. And it's got Spider-Man, Rain, the Daily Bugle, J. Jonah Jameson. And it's the only page from that issue that Mike Berkey doesn't own.
Okay. Wow.
Hiya, Mike. So it's so funny because when I got there from Esposito, and I really didn't pay much at all for them because he was in a rush to get to the track. It's what I could afford at the time. Like I couldn't afford 10 pages.
Right.
I could probably barely afford the 3 that I bought.
Right.
But I've just held on to them for so long, and I got to tell you, I look at them every day. And that's one of the things I ask these guys on Facebook that they show you their walls and like show me a piece of artwork you look at every day,
right? And
like sum it up for me. And that one page of Spider-Man, I look at it every day and I say, this page has every element of Spider-Man in it. He's on the rooftop. He grabs a paper. He's reading the paper. It's raining. The Daily Bugle's over. The cover is Norman Osborn dead or what have you. It's so cool. It's so, again, getting back to comics, right? I mean, and there's John Romita. He made a living doing that. It's wild that they could do that. It really is something else to me. And the talent, of course, the talent involved. I mean, I drew a lot in high school and have you, but it was never anything like something like that. And it's so funny when you read interviews with Romita, he says that he would sweat over each page. I'd sweat to get this done. I'm like, I look at it and I am a total lover of Kirby. Okay. The Mount Rushmore of comics, But to me, in the long run, Romita was always Marvel to me. When I saw a piece of his artwork, I knew that was Marvel. Again, Kirby's up there, nothing to take away from him. But Romita to me was, because, you look at something and you say, wait a second, that looks a little different. And he had redrawn a face or what have you. I'll never forget when I brought the, what was it, the Superman versus Spider-Man to a con. And I brought it up to Neil Adams. And he's like, well, why are you bringing this to me? I said, hey, man, I know you did some work on this book. Come on. He goes, oh, really, David? You think I did some work? I says, yeah. He goes, okay, pick out a page. And if you pick out a page that I worked on, I'll sign it. Page. Then I saw John Romita. I said, hey, he goes, why are you giving this to me? I said, I know you did some corrections on this. Let's look. And I found something he had drawn and he signed it. So I don't have Ross Andrew. I don't have Dick Giordano, and I don't have Jerry Conway signed it. I have two guys that were uncredited that signed it. But that was the joy. That was the joy of finding it. I'm very the guys in the group always kind of say, how do you know this? Like you look at something, you can pick out an inker or what have you, and it's just when you look at it, I guess in the age you look at it, it makes an impression on you so deep that you're never going to forget it. And I think people just forget that about comics, that it's such a visual medium, number one. And, your golden age, quote unquote, is when when you first read comics, that's your golden age. It could be the 80s to somebody. It could be the 50s to somebody. It could be the 60s. To me, it's the 70s. That was my golden age. And the 70s, I think it's a bad rap in comics. I really do. But you had all these amazing, let's put the artists aside for a second. You had Steve Gerber, you had Steve Englehart, you had Don McGregor, you had Marv Wolfman, you had Len Wein, you had all these amazing writers. Jerry Conway, yeah, exactly. Him. He wrote everything, Jerry Conway. Created the freaking Punisher. Give the guy, another guy in the Mount Rushmore. And, and then you say, okay, but, it's funny when the original Swamp Thing was coming out from Len Wein and Bernie Wrightson, I'll never forget buying it off the stands because every issue was like an improvement on the last. And it was something different from the last. And you'd look at this artwork and you would just be blown away by it, This was like a 20-cent comic book. Give me a break. Mark Millar he does a podcast. It's called Miller Time.
Okay.
I guess it's Millar time. I don't know if it's Millar or Miller. I'm not going to get into that. But anyway, he was interviewing Jeanette Kahn.
Okay.
And they were talking about comics. And she told him the story how they raised the price. And he said to her, that was a pretty ballsy move, raising the price of comics. And she was like, yeah, I know. But we were trying to say to everybody, these have worth. They're worth something. And Millar brought up the point. He says, yeah, well, they were like 12 cents from 1940 to like 1960, whatever, Of course they have worth.
Yeah.
I've been, from 12 cents up, I've been through every price increase, by the way, every price increase. And, doing a newspaper out, it was tough, Warren. It was tough putting those shekels together to buy it,
It's not
very,
easy.
very hard. And then when your mother wouldn't let you bring them in the house anymore, and you had to leave the bedroom window open, you had to slide them in the window, there's all kinds of stuff going on.
So here's my question. Let's say you have 5-10 minutes to yourself at the con. What are you looking for this year?
If anybody has any original art, I'd love to see the original art. Kimball Thorpe, who's our guest, who I've purchased so many pieces from him. He just does such wonderful work. When, with the artists that we have, I'm definitely going to look over their portfolios and see if there's anything that I'm interested in, because the art just makes it for me when you have something like that. You can see that. Let me see. I got some Kimball stuff right here. Here we go. So here's some Kimball Thorpe right here. A nice Hulk. Yeah, guy's talented. Did a great Ben Grimm, probably my favorite Marvel character. Sorry, Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And I commissioned. Well, he did this excellent Doctor Strange. That's amazing, Kimball
That's
Thorpe.
spot on. Yeah.
I know. And then I asked him for commission of the Thing, making coffee in the Baxter Building with his robe. I said he has to have his robe on his pink slippers. And and he knocked it out. So I'll be looking for art. I'll be looking for any kind of trades that maybe I don't have, signed trades. Another good buddy of mine, Steve Bloom, he just brings out all of his trades. And I'm like, dude, this trade is signed by so-and-so. He goes, yeah, no, I got to get rid of it. And wow, it's really amazing. That's, you get to the point where I guess you have to You know, how many storage units do you have, Warren?
Nah, I have my corner right over here for right now. That's just
Good, good.
that's where I'm allowed. Anything else, I'm pushing I'm happy to have.
Yeah, I would say art. Um, and you know, I like these the guys that are just starting out and the stuff they do, you know, because now it's a different perspective on it, you know. It's not just the same old thing, the same, you know, punch or what have you. They're doing their own thing, or if they have a comic. You know, we definitely have some people in there that have their own comics, like Phil Russert has his own comics that he's selling, and I've supported stuff of his on Kickstarter. So you know, you just see different things, you know, different things, something different, you know, and especially, you know, we get into this whole thing where, you know, the comics are just not for kids. Okay, so somebody says to me, "Oh, you know, my comic has a little bit of this, a little bit of that." I'm like, "Look, it doesn't matter. You know how to sell it, so you sell it. You know, don't worry about it. You know, and you're here. You'll find somebody here that'll be interested in what you're doing. Absolutely."
100%. So how can folks find out more about this year's HurriCon, get tickets, all that good information?
Just go on Facebook, look up HurriCon on Facebook, look up HurriCon LI on Instagram. I pretty much post like almost every day going up to it. So there'll either be a picture of a guest or a picture of something that's on the raffle table or telling you about the food we're going to have. The tickets are $5. It's a $5 donation to the church, or it's not admission, it's a donation. And when you pay for your table, it's a donation to the church because it is a fundraiser. Now, Oren, what is the secret origin of the Dollar Bin Bandits? Because I don't think you've ever really talked to. I've listened to a bunch of episodes. I've never really heard that, and I'd like to know what that's all about.
The origin was it is COVID. We are three dads who like comics. We had some time on our hands, and so we said, all right, well, let's just start talking about comics. And then I used to be a newspaper reporter. So I said, well, why don't we maybe try to start interviewing people? So through friends, we got William Mesner Loebs. That was our first kind of big.
Wow. Wow, I love that.
We were like, okay, that's pretty cool. So we just started throwing invites out there to people. And we were surprised in how many these wonderful people volunteered their time. I mean, they don't ask for money. They're just happy to, share their stories. We're happy to put their stories out there for them.
I mean, Oren, I'm looking over your list here. It's like, Judd Winnick, Mike Barron, Joe Rubenstein, Sean Chen. I haven't been able to get Sean to come to a show. He's donated, but I haven't been able to get him to come down to a show. Mm-hmm. You got Ron Moore, Steve Rude. Look, that's another one. My friend Steve Bloom, who I mentioned earlier, huge Steve Rude fan. Oh. Those hundreds of pages of Steve Rude artwork, you wouldn't believe it. Yeah. I mean, Roger Stern. I love Roger. I used to buy Roger Stern's fanzine back in the day. And Bob Layton they published a fanzine called Contemporary Pictorial Literature, some crazy comic name like that. It was so silly. But those are the guys that they discovered John Byrne. And I got a nice commission from Mr. Bob Layton.
Oh, boy.
The Hulk and the Hulkbuster. He was not happy to draw the Hulkbuster. He said, it's different in every issue. How am I going to do it? But he did it. That's so cool. Rochester, Steve Bissett. I love Steve Bissett's work. He's so great. Yep. I mean, everybody here. Look at all these people you have. Man, how many interviews have you done?
I think we're at we hit 200 some odd episodes. We might be close to 300 episodes.
That's amazing. That is so cool.
And the thing is, unfortunately, we've lost a few of the people, the guests that we've had, Trina Williams. Oh yeah. And so, so to be able to get their stories out there and have the time to spend with them and stuff like that, it's really an honor to have done that.
I'm looking through your list, like even I'm John Morrow from TwoMorrows Publications. Yep. Have you ever spoken to John Cook from TwoMorrows? Yes. Okay, so the funny story about John Cook is I went to a show in Ramapo, New York, which is upstate again, Ramapo. Mm-hmm. And Jack Kirby Donovan was probably 2 years old, so it was like almost 25 years ago. Yep. And I went around with him, and I brought him to all the pros, and I said, "Hi, this is my son, Jack Kirby Donovan. Would you take a picture?" And I put him with Kurt Schaffenberg, a big smile on his face. Marie Severin, big smile on her face. Julie Schwartz, I see this kid for. I'm like, come on, hold the kid, right? And John Cook was there holding little Jack Kirby Donovan. Well, when we went to Baltimore Comic-Con, we recreated that scene of Jack sitting on John Cook's lap, and that was in the Steve Gerber issue of Comic Book Creator.
That's awesome. Now, he's such a good writer and
Oh my gosh,
like an investigative journalist for
oh.
comics. Like he digs deep. Like
And
his
where
travel
would,
book is
where
phenomenal.
would your history be without him? You got these guys, and look, it's not a high-paying gig or anything like that, but
No.
the passion. I guess maybe you talked about the con again. I think with HurriCon, I'm looking for like that passion. The passion of I love comics. I want to share with you. Okay, now this Jim Shooter. You interviewed Jim Shooter. Okay, so I go to a TurnerCon probably 10 years ago
Right.
with Jack and with David, and then like teenagers, like 12 and 14, right? We're walking around. Their buddy Chris was there too, who was like my third son. So Chris, David, and Jack. We see Jim Shooter, and I start talking to him. And I said, Jim, can you do me a favor? Can you talk to both of my sons? He goes, about what? I said, look, they got to start contributing. When did you write your first story? Like 12 years old? Talk to these guys about bringing some money. So we had a bunch of laughs. And then I went home and I said, these guys, it was a TurnerCon. They have no panels. They have no panels.
Right.
So I wrote to them and they wrote me back and they said, okay, give us an idea. I gave them 5 ideas. The next year I did 5 panels with these guys. It was amazing. I mean, I don't know. I don't think I sent you a list what they were, but so many people that I've been able to talk to over the years that for some reason, eternal context, it's okay to allow me to do this. I've spoken to Lou Ferrigno.
Wow.
Lou says to me, look, David, you got to talk. You got to look right at me because I can't hear you, No way. Lou he went up. He's talking about lifting up he went to Jones Beach and somebody had parked their VW too close and he lifted it up and he moved it. His eyes didn't turn green, but he did that. And then they had me interview Anson Williams, Potsy from Happy Days, Anson Williams. And I'm like, so I asked on Facebook, give me some questions you'd like me to ask him. And some of them weren't the nicest questions. He grabbed the paper, he goes, let me read that, David, and starts reading it. And now this is a trivia question you don't know. His uncle created the Heimlich maneuver.
Really?
That is a piece of trivia. There's no way you knew what that was, the Heimlich maneuver. Right. So he did that. And then, one year there was a lot of people there, but I was trying to figure out, what's the best way to interview these guys. Mm-hmm. So I interviewed Mike Zeck. What a great, I've followed him since he was a fan artist.
Yeah.
And just an amazing one. And then James O'Barr was there. He created the Crow.
Yep.
Thinking he'd be a great interview, but how do you talk to this guy? Because the whole comic came out of, I believe it was the death of his girlfriend. I believe it had something to do with the car that wasn't fixed or whatever. And I'm like, right. How do you talk to this guy? And I got to tell you, I probably laughed more during that interview with him. He was talking about living in Germany and all this stuff. We had such a great conversation. He was such a nice guy. I was really, really thrown off by him. I thought he was great. And every time I see him, I think he's wonderful.
Yeah.
And I even interviewed Frank Whaley. Frank Whaley was in Pulp Fiction. He was the guy that got shot for the Kahuna Burger. He was there because he does a podcast with his wife. He was for some reason they let me interview him. I interviewed the 2 stars from Neverending Story, the princess and the trio. Yeah. And all those pictures are up on the site. You want to check them out. They're all there. Come talk to me. I'll show you some pictures. So yeah, I'm not a dollar bin bandit. Okay, not yet. But
probationary. You're getting there for that 5th spot.
Have to send you my resume.
It's like in baseball. It's a 5-man rotation. We have 4 starters right now. We need that 5th man. There you go.
That's it. I'm ready. Oren, I'm telling you, at a moment's notice.
We're in.
I'm ready.
All right. We'll do this. Well, I just want to say, hey, thanks for taking the time, and B, thanks for all you're doing because it's helping the community. It's helping comic fans. I know it's a lot of time and effort on your part, but I could tell that you truly love what you're doing. I think it shows in the con itself.
Yeah, I'm I definitely feel that I'm blessed being able to do it. I'm blessed being able to have the health to do it. I'm blessed because I was telling you the 70s and stuff like that. My birthday's on Saturday. We're not going to get into how old I am, but I'm pretty old. And I'm blessed by having the community around me that wants to help me, so, and like I said, it's not a one-man show. You get a lot of help from everybody. I mean, just the donations for the raffles and what have you are wonderful. And, and the great thing is, when the kids come in a costume, they're so into their costumes, whether it's a Halloween costume or something they made, it's so much fun.
Yeah.
It's just to have a good time. It's to give back to the community, and it's to have the community give back to the church.
Right.
To say, hey, you were there for me, I'm there for you. And last year, last winter, what happened was, and this is when we only do it once a year, the furnace died at the church, the actual furnace, and it was a big bill. So they said to me, David, could you do another show? I'm like, well, I already do one in November. You want me to? Yeah, I could do another one. I'm like, oh, all right, I'll see what I can do. They said, look, you could call it Furnace Con. So actually, there is one Furnace Con, and then there's a HurriCon.
You have the sole Furnace Con in comic book history. That is all you.
Right. And then, of course, one friend who wants to bust my chops says, oh, what happens when the toilet overflows? Are you going to have toilet con? I'm like, no, we're not going to do that.
We'll just call someone to take care of that. Get money another way. And we are back. Yeah, HurriCon sounds great this year. I'd love to get out there. I don't know if I'm going to be able to, but I hope you will be able to get out there. Our friend Keith Williams will be there. Keith's one of the greatest guys in the comic industry today. Remember, it is this Saturday, July 20th, East Rockaway, New York. That's out in Long Island, 100 Main Street. The money's going to go to a great, great organization. It's going to help so many people. And you're going to get so many cool comic books, so many cool original art, and have a ton of fun as well. So please, please, please mark it on your calendars. Get out there and have a great time. David, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. It's an absolute pleasure. Going to have you on just to talk comics in general, because you're the fifth Bandito. You are one of us. So thank you guys. It's been an exciting week so far, and more stuff coming up next week. Remember, rate, review, subscribe. Remember, guys, listen, Mike is giving away comics from his personal collection. You can go and tell your friends, hey guys, I have comics that once belonged to Mike Farah of the Donovan Bandits. You write a review on Amazon or any of the other podcasting sites, let us know, and Mike will pick a name, and you could win those books. So, it's a pretty easy way to get some really cool books. So be sure you do it this weekend, and have a wonderful weekend too. Bye now.